Welcome to Justice Matters. I am Denise George, Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Justice Matters is a program aimed to inform, engage, and empower you with knowledge of Virgin Islands laws and legal issues that affect our everyday lives and our community, including insightful discussions with special guests so you can be empowered to make a difference and be a part of the solution. Today's topic is Part 2 of Crimes Against Our Children. We focus now on protecting our children from abuse and neglect. We will cover the Virgin Islands child protection laws that have the sole purpose of providing protection of our most vulnerable and precious resource, our children. Now, last week in Part 1, we talked mainly about child abuse crimes, punishment, arrests, and prosecution of child abuse cases. Those cases that reach to the level of arrests and prosecutions are really only a fraction of child abuse cases that actually occur here in the territory. You see, arrests and criminal child abuse prosecutions occur once there is a thorough criminal investigation by the VI Police Department, sufficient probable cause for the arrest, and sufficient evidence of proof beyond a reasonable doubt against a perpetrator who is accused of committing the offense. The focus there is on evidence and prosecution against the alleged abuser. On the other hand, apart from the criminal prosecution process, VI law provides for the protection of the child that in a process that is solely focused on the best interests of that child. Unlike what you might hear in the news about the criminal cases which become public upon arrest, many other child abuse cases you would not hear about because they are lawfully handled in a confidential process and procedure for the child's protection and welfare. Our Virgin Islands protection laws provide that the public policy of this territory is to protect children whose health and welfare may be adversely affected through abuse and neglect. It's also to strengthen the family and to make the home safe for children by enhancing the parental capacity for good care. It also says that it's to provide a temporary or permanent nurturing and safe environment for children when necessary, and for those purposes to require the reporting of child abuse, investigation of such reports, and provision of services when needed by the child and the family. Let's just recap now on what is child abuse and neglect under Virgin Islands law. Child abuse involves when a person knowingly or recklessly causes a child to suffer physical, mental, or emotional injury, or knowingly or recklessly causes a child to be placed in a situation where it is reasonably foreseeable that a child may suffer physical, mental, or emotional injury, depriving the child of any of the basic necessities of life, including nutrition, medical care, safety, and protection, or having sexual contact with or engaging a child in any kind of sexual activity, including pornography. As for the definition of physical injury includes but is not limited to any skin bruising, bleeding, failure to thrive, malnutrition, burn, bone fracture, soft tissue swelling, subdural hematoma, injury to any internal organ, any physical condition that threatens a child's health or welfare. Serious emotional injury or serious mental injury means that which creates a substantial risk of death or which causes serious or protracted impairment of mental or emotional health. Also, serious physical injury means that which creates a substantial risk of death or which causes serious or permanent disfigurement or which causes serious impairment of health or loss of protracted impairment of the function of any bodily organ or limb. Then there's persons mandated to report. One thing that is clear is whether or not going through the the criminal process or the child protection procedure laid out in our laws. The whole process of protecting an abused child starts with a report. Reporting is so important that our laws place a legal duty to report suspected child abuse on certain persons and professions, such as if a physician or hospital personnel engaged in the admission, examination, care, or treatment of persons, a nurse, a dentist, or any other medical or behavioral health professional, a school teacher or other school personnel, social service worker, daycare worker, or other child care or foster care worker, or any peace officer or law enforcement official has reasonable cause to suspect that a child has been subjected to abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect, or otherwise observes the child being subjected to conditions or circumstances that would reasonably result in abuse or neglect, he or she shall immediately report it to the police or the Department of Human Services. Now, reports of child abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect must be made by these persons immediately by telephone or otherwise to the U.S. Virgin Islands Police Department or to the Department of Human Services. The Virgin Islands Police Department then is required to immediately relay such reports to the Department of Human Services, followed by a written report within 48 hours. Our law also allows any of these persons required to report cases of child abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect to take photographs of the areas of trauma that's visible on a child, and if medically indicated, performed radiological examinations on the child, and promptly then send such photographs or x-rays to the Department of Human Services Protective Services section. The Department of Human Services is the department that receives all reports of alleged child abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect. And DHS, for short, is required to provide or arrange for emergency temporary care and protection of the child victim. Within 24 hours of notification of an alleged child abuse, Department of Human Services has to commence a thorough investigation of that report. And upon completion of the investigation, where appropriate, they are to provide services to the abused children, protection of the children and services to the families, including the care of the abused and neglected children who are placed in the custody of the department upon granting of a petition by the Superior Court. Now, in addition to that, it must be noted that there is immunity from liability. And what that means is that the law offers protection to those who report, who those are required to report, or any person who reports, whether it's an official or an institution that reports suspected child abuse in good faith. They are immune from any kind of civil or criminal liability. So they are comfortable then to report any cases of child abuse or suspected child abuse. You can be comfortable that you are protected by the law. So those failing to report, who are required to report sexual abuse, neglect, can be guilty of a misdemeanor and fined up to $500 or imprisoned up to 1 year or both. Then there's the issue of confidentiality. In order to protect the rights of the child, all records concerning reports of child abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect made to the government of the Virgin Islands, and all records generated as a result of such reports shall be confidential and not for public purview. There are many other protections by the court of the child that are done in the best interest of the child in this procedure of child protection. And that's why we have with us today our guest, Carla Benjamin, who is the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Human Services, and she has a wealth of information and experience with respect to the protection of our children in child abuse and neglect matters. Welcome to Justice Matters, Ms. Benjamin.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
How long have you been with the Department of Human Services?
First started in 1995 as a social worker who investigates child welfare matters. And then I was with the department from 1995 to 2015. That's 20 years. And then I left for a brief period, and then I've been back with the department since 2019.
How long have you been working during your career with respect to the care and the welfare of children in child abuse and neglect cases?
About 27 years.
As a social worker, you've been involved. Have you been involved intimately with respect to handling cases that come into the Department of Human Services?
Yes, definitely. For the first 9 years, I'd say, of my career, I was a child protective services investigator. So I was a social worker whose primary role was to receive cases of child abuse and neglect and then investigate the same.
What I want you to first tell us, what is the importance of these reports coming in from the people who are mandated to report or other persons who report?
Well, I would say the primary reason why it's important to report is because child protective services laws are in place because children are not able to protect themselves. Children are basically at the mercy of the adults who are around them, especially the adults who are charged with the adults who have responsibility for ensuring that they're safe, ensuring that they're well, and ensuring that they have all of their, starting with their basic needs met. And if any of those things are not happening, children are often not able to report themselves for a number of reasons, and to be able to protect themselves sometimes from the people who are supposed to be taking care of them.
And with respect to the persons mandated to report, such as physicians, such as child care workers and teachers, education officials, and these people are required by law to report. How much is it that human services depend on their reports coming in? And the second part is, why is it that those particular positions are so pivotal in the reporting of children and child abuse and neglect cases?
There's a specific section of the laws, section 2533, that lists those people that you were talking about, the physicians, police, daycare workers, teachers, individuals who are in positions that give them authority over children, individuals who are supposed to be taking care of children. The law says that they must report. However, anyone in the community can report. And so we receive reports from those individuals that the law says have to report. And then we also receive reports from anyone in the community who has reason to suspect that there may be child abuse and neglect going on. And we need the individuals who are around children, who see children, who are responsible for children, to make those reports to us, because we're not in a position to see children. And that was one of the unfortunate things of about the pandemic. The fact that children were sort of cut off from all the other eyes that would usually see them. They weren't going to school, so teachers and other people outside of the home weren't able to see them. They weren't able to go to after school programs, just to be out in the community where other people who would have their best interests at heart were able to see them and see whether something was wrong, whether it be because of their behaviors or whether it be because of some other obvious signs, such as bruises or cuts or any sort of injury.
What kind of reports do you get? As you started with bruises and cuts and that sort of thing, what other kinds of signs or injuries that you've seen over the years?
The signs and symptoms they vary across a wide range, from the obvious things that you mentioned, such as obvious injuries that require explanation. And then there are those things that are not so obvious. It could be a child who used to be extroverted and used to engage and play and talk to people, who all of a sudden that changes. Now, it doesn't always mean that 100% of the time that behavior change is a result of child maltreatment, but it's often a pretty good signal that something is happening, that that child would be helped by being able to talk about, or that situation be explored. One of the different cases that I've worked on over my career was a child who had selective mutism. A selective mutism is a condition basically where the child only speaks to certain people or doesn't speak to certain people. So, you know, when they say someone is mute, that means that they can't speak. Selective mutism means that they speak selectively, or only to a selected few people. Yes, that was an interesting case. And surprisingly, but not so surprisingly, the child's refusal to talk to certain people was tied to the fact that those people were harming them. Now, let me give a disclaimer and say that every child who has selective mutism is that the reason is not because they're being abused or the people who they don't speak to are the abusers. This was just one of those interesting cases that I worked on.
Just in my experience also, in a lot of the cases that have come actually to the Department of Justice or to the law enforcement, a number of times the teachers or the counselors at school actually gets the complaints from whether it's children or a child's friend. So then they're responsible and they're in the position to be able to then forward it. So sometimes when I look at that, would you say the people who are mandated to report, they're actually also in the position where people trust them, or even children can trust them, sometimes even more than the parents would tell the teacher rather than the parents, or the doctor rather than the parents. Have you seen that?
Reporting tends to slow down when school is out. And one of those reasons is because children spend a lot of time at school. Some children eat at school. Some children are at school during school hours and at school after school. And I mean, just by virtue of that learning process, teachers make indelible impressions on children. I mean, if you talk to just about anybody, can ask who their favorite teacher was, they can tell you who that person was. They become our mentors, and often they are people who children who feel safe to confide in and to talk to.
Okay, now what happens after there's a report? The report comes in, what does Human Services do?
The report comes into the Department of Human Services. Depending upon the content of the report, what is reported, I mentioned before about those obvious signs. If a report comes in and there are things such as bruises, cuts, those automatically elevate the response time, with a priority response time, for a couple of reasons. One could be because the report suggests that the child could be in immediate danger. They may have suffered some sort of an injury that is life-threatening, or that could worsen. Even if the injury is not one that is life-threatening, we would want to respond to that immediately, because as a part of our investigation, we do things such as take pictures and take actions that capture what the situation is that we encounter. So if there's anything that could be of evidentiary value, anything that could help to prove that what is reported is in fact what is happening, or to document what the social worker or the caseworker found when they encountered the child, and we would definitely go out on those cases.
There's some things that you do with respect to protecting the children if it's perhaps, would you say, a life-threatening type of injury. And then there's a different procedure if it's not life-threatening. Can you just briefly explain the difference?
It's not a different procedure from the perspective of assessing what has happened and responding as soon as possible. The more serious cases may be, like I said, cases where a child's life or health or body may be in danger. Some cases require us to contact the police department. There are times when we receive reports where the child is reportedly not safe or has been injured, and it's a situation where the social worker, caseworker might also be in danger, because we're going out there with is our identification and book and a pen often. And so we are able to contact the police department and have them assist us. And in some of those cases, they're also doing an investigation of their own, depending upon how the situation presents. If it's a case where, let's say there's possible emotional or verbal abuse, because that is also something that we investigate, we respond as well. This may not be one of those situations where we require the police intervention at the onset, but the social worker would still go out there, caseworker would still go out there, and our first responsibility is to assess risk. As soon as we encounter the situation, our goal is to what we call lay eyes on. We want to see the child. We want to ensure that the child is safe, and that if there was some sort of incident of maltreatment, that incident is not going to recur or worsen.
And then those options, I see that there are certain options and remedies that the law has to protect the child. And one situation is taking the child into emergency custody. And that's mentioned, and that's perhaps in the most serious of cases. Am I right?
You are right. So as I mentioned, we assess safety first. And if if the situation that the social worker responds to, the worker responds and it appears as though that child is in imminent danger of death or serious injury, the child is not safe, and the persons responsible for ensuring their safety is either the person who is alleged to have harmed them or is not in a position to continue to protect them, then the department must step in and ensure the child's safety. And the law allows us to do that involuntarily if the parents or the guardians are not able to demonstrate that they can protect the child.
And then, and the law allows you to do that, but once you do that, the Department of Human Services has a next step, correct, in going to court to justify or the taking of the child and to present something.
We have to.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
We have to. The us removing children is a last resort. Even when the decision is made that the child is not going to continue to be safe in whatever the situation is their usual living situation, the family has the option of coming up with a plan. So we do ask them, is there an aunt, a grandmother, a close friend of the family, somewhere else where the child will be safe while we continue to assess the situation. Of course, this is if the child is not in the hospital or.
And if you don't get someone, an appropriate family member or an appropriate suggestion from the family that you're removing the child from, then what are the other options?
A foster family setting, which would be a foster home, that is reflective of a regular family setting. If that is not available, or if there's some safety concern, or if the child has some elevated need, then there are also group foster home situations locally, like Queen Louise Home for Children or St. Thomas Nana Babies Children Home, but situations where the child is in a place with other children who also are in need of protection.
Okay, and what about the use of, let's say, the victim advocates organizations such as, let's say, Family Resource Center or Women's Coalition of St. Croix? Does Human Services ever utilize those types of, the private victim advocate agencies as a part of the teamwork to assist children or families?
Oh, yes, we work very closely with them. You did mention that the department is probably the primary point of contact with regard to child protection. But when we talk about the child protection system or child welfare system, it is all of us. It is the Department of Human Services, Police Department, definitely those child advocacy agencies. We at the department refer out services. So if children who are in a situation like this who need counseling, or the family needs counseling, these are often the agencies that we reach out to first to provide services. mostly because these organizations, such as the Women's Coalition and Family Resource Center, provide services to families free of charge. They're able to access those services. They're able to develop a relationship with and talk to someone and receive those services. And we continue to work with those agencies throughout the process. They help the families get prepared for, because you mentioned if a child is removed, the department has 48 hours to generate a report that we submit to the Attorney General's office, and then which then goes to the court. And we have to go before a judge and explain why the removal was necessary, and the judge gets to make a determination about whether or not our decision was warranted, whether or not we did act within the confines of the law to remove the child. And often, as that process goes along, agencies like Family Resource Center and the Women's Coalition work hand in hand with us, helping the families with counseling, sometimes with parenting skills.
Some cases where it doesn't require necessarily a removal, where it might not be a life-threatening situation, but that it requires some kind of service to assure the safety, or even to get a situation where the child can then, if they're removed, be able to get back in a family environment. What those counseling services are.
This human services staff is not. We're not, well, I was gonna say we're not staffed well enough to provide those services, but like I said, I've worked outside of jurisdiction. Usually social services agencies contract with other agencies for that services. So there are the nonprofits and child advocacy agencies who do this often without cost to the families. And then there are private counselors and other agencies in the community that we have contracts with, that we pay to provide those services as well.
Is there anything that you'd like to add that you think is important for the community to know?
We at the Department of Human Services, what we do is guided by law, so that often people report and they said a report and nothing happened. Well, nothing that you saw happened, or maybe the expectation is that Human Services is going to get involved and we're going to remove the child, but the law doesn't allow us to do that in every instance. There are situations where they hear person was arrested for and charged with child abuse and neglect or child neglect, and then it's kind of like, oh, the Department of Human Services finally did something. Well, no, we actually can arrest people. That would be the police department. So I was kind of headed in that direction when you asked about the reporting. It's kind of tongue in cheek to say trust the process, but they really do need to trust all of us who have a role to do what it is we're supposed to do, but it has to start with them reporting.
And I think the very important point that you made especially is that usually they're not able to report. They're not in the position to do that. And it's our responsibility to look out for most vulnerable in our community. And I thank you very much.
Thank you for helping get this information out.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Justice Matters.